all of you. So whether you're brand new or whether you've been here with us many times, we're really glad that you're here. Virtual World Society is dedicated to development, education, and integration of immersive technology. Now, in homes, families, schools, businesses, and beyond, limited to imagination, and our imaginations are just starting to get started, right? So, I'm very excited to introduce you to Tom Furness. Now, most of you in the room already know and are awed by the work that he's done over the body of his career, but he is literally the grandfather of VR technology and headsets. I'm not sure there's anyone else that has been in the space longer than Tom. And we're just so excited to have Tom in a situation here where he can invite guests in and we learn things every time. It's not only entertaining, it's very educational. So Tom, I'm going to throw it over to you. We're so excited that you and your guests are here today.
You bet. Thanks so much, Donna. And as always, we really appreciate what educators in VR have done for us and helping us with this. And this is we feel like a family. You know, we're sort of in a space here together, and it's wonderful to bring in our guests from time to time and have them become part of the family. Let's make sure you guys are on the air. Am I on the air? I'm on the air. You guys are on the air, and also megaphone. Okay. So today, a fantastic day. This is the first time ever I've had two sisters with us. Is it okay if I call you sisters? Because I feel like you're sisters. Yeah. And they are a hoot. And they bring a whole bunch of light to the world and to me. We've had a chance to chat before last week prior to this event, and we had such a good time. And so what we'd like to do is I'm going to sort of ask them questions, and they're going to ask you questions, I think, along the way. But let's sort of get to know them, and we're going to drill down a little bit and find out about these two amazing people. And so let me start off and ask you guys, what in the world were you like as kids?
This wasn't in the
No. I told you I was going to ask questions you weren't expecting. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny because I hadn't thought a lot about what I was like as a kid and then when I got into virtual reality, I started making connections. So, I mean, obviously there are different ways to describe me when I was young, but I was in a way a creator of worlds. I was the oldest of my siblings and of the neighborhood kids, and I would come up with these projects or adventures, and I would reframe the world, right? Like, we have to solve this mystery and look around the neighborhood for clues. Or at one point I got together a couple of friends' families and we formed our own I can't believe I'm sharing this here, but something called the Looking Good Salon, and we would do each other's hairstyles, and we would take pictures and we would put out a monthly newsletter to friends and family. But it really was inventing a new world, imagining our own world that we played in. And so, I didn't even know virtual reality existed until like a few years ago.
So wow, yeah. So Jess, did you know this about Eve?
I did know a little bit about the building worlds part. I did, but I did not know about the Looking Good Club, which I hope we get to start up again because that would be very fun.
Okay, well,
yeah.
So what about you, Eve? What about you, Jess? About what you were like as a kid?
I was pretty bossy, which I think is probably the same now. But I was also a competitive gymnast as a young girl, and then switched into being a competitive dancer. And part of the thing that I loved doing was just getting in front of the living room and dancing and putting on a show and just playing in that space. And then also terrifying myself I remember standing on a balance beam and like hysterically crying and then doing a backflip and just like pushing through those fears to like do the trick you're afraid of. And I think a lot of when I stepped into VR, it was so much of the unknown for me and being scared a little bit of the technology, but then just like crying my way through it. until I had fun.
Oh wow, that's so cool. Okay, I guess I need to welcome room 2. We have room 2. You know what that means, guys? We have lots of folks showing up. So welcome to you, room 2.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So now, so this obviously has had some impact on who you are today, right? And but let
Yes.
me ask you this question before we go into that. So, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh gosh, the options seem so limited. you know,
Mhm.
but I think I did. I was a writer from a young age. I didn't necessarily know how to tell good stories, but I would try constantly. I would write poems in the backseat of the car on road trips, and I would start stories even if I didn't know how to finish them. When we got our first computer, I would sit down and I would develop these characters and start writing. It didn't seem like a practical career plan, so that wasn't necessarily my plan. And when I got to college, I think I thought I would major in either English or economics. Because I did love stories and storytelling, and economics was just vague enough, but seemed very practical. And I didn't end up choosing either of those paths in college, but yeah.
What did you choose?
I chose so I was enamored of storytelling, and I think I was always curious how you told a good story and engaged an audience. And so I took a mythology course in college, and I loved it. And I also really liked language, and so I opted to major in classics. And so I studied Latin and ancient Greek and the beginnings of storytelling, and how it impacted culture and civilizations. And I loved it. And everyone said, "Oh gosh, what are you going to do with a degree in dead languages?" And I don't think anyone's answer that neither they nor I thought it would be, "Oh, I'm going to develop stories for future technology." But it's
what do you know?
who knows?
Yeah.
It was not clear along the way. That's for sure. I tried finance. I tried some other things, but turns out it connected.
Yeah. So, how about you then, Jess? What did you want to be when you grew up?
So I was like really focused on being a classical ballet dancer in high school, and so I thought that was what I was going to be. But I really loved physics, like as a passion. So I like kind of got myself mixed up, I guess. I like thought my career was going to be a dancer, but I was like so enamored by. I read the Elegant Universe, and I like thought Brian Greene was brilliant, and the string theory was like the idea that there was a theory for everything. And so I was in New York City, and I just like looked him up and went to his lectures, and I got his PAs at Columbia helping me understand it. So when I got injured my senior year of high school and decided to go to college, I ended up combining physical and classical physics and classical ballet at Gallatin and NYU. And then I realized after my first semester I didn't want to do either of those things in my life. And so somehow by the end, when I graduated, I combined computer science and filmmaking, which really kind of set a great foundation for this world. Storytelling in new spaces.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is amazing. So, it's one of those things. It's interesting that when you find all these folks that are into VR and AR and extended reality, they have political science backgrounds, they have English background. I mean, they don't have necessarily engineers or computer scientists necessarily. And it all comes from passion. And what sort of what you discover along the way. Now, somehow, you guys got together, right?
Yes.
How did that happen? How in the world in your journeys does that happen?
I think we should start with Israel.
Story. Yes, I think so.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
Well, you know what we could do? We could each give a quick how we. Well, yeah, we could. So I had discovered. You go ahead. You can start.
I guess. I mean, we met on a bus in the middle of the desert in Israel, right?
That is correct. That is correct.
I remember that conversation very well.
Yes.
We ended up on this really fun trip together that was sponsored by the Schusterman Foundation, where it was like a group of 40 or so, right? AR, VR
Yeah.
influencers, and they took us on this tour of Israel and introduced us to their tech in the space. And we were kind of the two like storytellers of this large group. And yeah.
No, I know. I remember meeting you and thinking, oh gosh, well, we kind of do the same thing, so we'll probably never get to work together. And I'm so glad I was wrong.
I know. It's like, oh, competition. Yeah, and then I guess like over when we returned from Israel, we realized we lived like a half a mile from each other. Yeah, like walking distance in Santa Monica. And so we started going to screenings together and then started just talking and airing our frustrations about what's happening in the world of VR, where like we'd have work and we're trying to figure out how to get it seen. And some of our work was similar. So we're like, if we partner up, maybe we can get a larger organization to want to feature some of what we've created. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then in terms of what we're doing now with the Look Club, we really wanted to find a way to come together and talk about immersive stories. Um,
No, it's true,
so
right? Because we had a similar journey and struggle, and then we were creating this content that was groundbreaking and exciting, and we were really proud of. And it's surprisingly hard to get it in front of people in the world of VR. We're still figuring out, especially for narrative content, what the distribution model looks like, and how to reach the most people, and to do it to do it all on your own. I mean, it's not that efficient, and it's redundant then when somebody else is doing the same thing. So we thought, well, if we can come together and try and find the synergies and make more progress faster, that will help us, and that will also help more creators. And that's kind of the impetus behind the Look Club, is how can we help everyone who's creating immersive narrative both to learn from each other and to get their work discovered and get their work out to audiences.
and to be able to talk about it and other people's work, I think. And that, I mean, another thing that Eve and I ended up doing together, not knowing, was writing chapters
Oh yeah.
in the handbook, which Jackie Morey, who was here, is still here, is one of the co-editors
She's moved
of the
around,
book.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I had a chapter about discovering a language of storytelling, really focused on the visual and mise en scène. And Eve had two chapters. She's an overachiever.
Right, I didn't mention that part of my childhood. I skipped that, right? No, I am, and one of the chapters was a case study of the show I created, which is the world's first 360 VR sitcom, which I'm really proud of. And the other is introducing a language for talking about point of view in virtual reality, which we will definitely be talking about more today, and which I really want to say, while we appreciate her work in editing the book and her perspective on it as somebody who's been in the world of VR, I think the fact that she found value in that language meant so much and really encouraged us to share it with a wider audience.
Yeah. So we just kept going, Tom, because we were and talking. So to give you a chance to insert yourself. But it was so great when we got to speak with you about what we were doing, and you were able to contextualize kind of from your perspective how important talking about VR is in making sure we understand what we're about to see.
Mm-hmm.
Are you muted by chance?
You had a question you want to ask the audience at this point, I believe, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to ask?
I'll start with mine, and then we'll go to yours.
Yes.
So since we're talking about storytelling generally, I mean, I think one of the things that struck me honestly in college and has stayed with me is just the power of storytelling to reach people. And so I was curious with all of you here if there's a story, what the first story you remember being impacted by is. Just in life, because I think we remember that first story that really stuck with us, and I'm curious if any of you might want to share. Daniel.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna put my microphone on. There you go. Funny you should ask that. I remember distinctly being a little kid sitting in the back of my parents' car with my sister, driving probably from Germany to England on a summer holiday. It's dark outside and there's a tape playing, and it was a story about the lady worm, but I remember it being the ladily worm. It was a completely innocent story, but it freaked me out. And I remember.
The hand raise wasn't used. We couldn't hear if that was Daniel talking.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I see.
Could you repeat it, please? Thanks.
What was the first story that you remember as a kid? Is that right?
There. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Was that right? And so it was this really unsettling, dark story for me as a kid. And I heard it back years ago by chance, like 30 years later. I found this old tape. I listened to it, fully expecting to be transported back to being a little kid and being spooked. It was just completely benign.
Yeah, it's funny how that, like, when you hear something from one perspective, when you see it later, it means something totally different to you. I always, my example for that is like Sex in the City. When I watched it when I was in high school, I was like, oh my goodness, these women are crazy. And then I watched it in my 30s, like, oh, that's kind of fun.
So, we have another one. Can I take another one? Is that good, guys?
Sure.
Okay, story tech. I'm going to amplify your voice. There you go. We should be able to hear you now.
Well, I'm Brian Hurst, and it was a bar in Queen Celeste.
Oh.
I think the bar was more about the story world for me. I wanted to be in the kingdom with the bar in Celeste. And then the secondary one was my sister was 5 years older than I and wanted to teach me how to read as soon as possible, even though I was not in first grade. So the whole world of Dick, Jane, and Sally came alive.
Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. Now, Jess, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it a step further and ask, like, if anyone had an immersive experience that they watched and it affected them in a similar way to some of these earlier stories.
Something that maybe really stuck with you.
So there's the raise hand button down to the bottom right. So yeah, if you would mind clicking that.
Me.
Oh.
Can I go?
For sure.
Okay. Well, let me tell you what was. I'd spent a lot of time in VR, but when it really, I guess, dawned on me the power of this is when the New York Times had. You remember when they sent out the the million Google Cardboards and they started having these immersive experiences, sort of 360 video experiences, things like that. And one of the first ones I watched was the food drop that was done in Africa. Oh gosh, I was standing there in this field with all the other people, the villagers that were waiting to have a food drop. And never before had I realized what it must be like to really be together as a village, hungry, no food, and waiting for an airplane to fly over and make a food drop. And so I was looking at the people. I was looking around and looking in their faces, how eager they were. And then when the food drop happened, to actually go rush up to these bags of rice, I assume it was, and grab them and move on. I mean, I could watch that on TV. I could watch it on the computer screen. Is not the same. Being there, I felt like I was there. I felt like I identified with those people, and so that's an immersive thing. Yeah, the scale
Yeah.
of it. I mean, you were there.
That's,
You felt there, and I'll always remember it.
yeah.
And you remember being there.
That's awesome, Tom. So, can we take a couple from the audience as well?
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Why don't we start with Keely? Go ahead, Keely.
Keely.
Hello. Looks like I'm amplified and on air. Great. Okay. So the story that really stuck with me was traveling while black. That one was really memorable for me, and I felt like I was actually in the diner and being in those conversations I probably wouldn't have been in real life. So I really appreciated that knowledge and then that opportunity to hear about people's stories. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Okay, Steph, what do you have for us?
Well, the first time I donned a pair of these glasses, of the Oculus Go, I was on a Broadway stage, and a woman was singing from the Anastasia, and you were literally in the middle of the stage, surrounded by all these dancing, wonderfully beautiful music, wonderfully beautiful everything, and seeing where the lights were and what it was like to look out at the audience from the stage, which is something that, unless you've ever done it, you don't realize what that really looks like. And it was one of those feelings where, oh, this is what it's like. I'm actually here. But just recently, I was doing a tour of Worlds and found myself crowded in a Christmas train that was in motion. And there were too many people in the cab, so we were, shoulder to shoulder to shoulder. And I found myself feeling exactly as you would with in a really comfortable, you know everybody, and they were all kind of together, so you didn't mind jostling around with one another. Then we wound up in a gigantic hall where a Strauss waltz was playing, and you could literally dance to the Strauss waltz. And then I took the headset off, and boy, did my room look little after. And that's the first time I ever realized that it really does give you a feeling that you're somewhere else.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Donna.
No, can we take one more? Do we have time for one?
Yeah, let's take one more. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take
Paul was right at the beginning as well. So Paul, go ahead. Your last one for this.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you again, Dr. Furness. I've been dealing with this virtual reality, augmented reality stuff for decades, and so I was there at the CIFX conference in 2006, when you were there with Nonit de La Pagna, and unfortunately I missed your last session. Was that last week, 2 weeks ago? When she
2
was
weeks
your
ago.
guest? Yeah, 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry I missed that one. But anyway, I've been dealing with AR, VR for a while, and the 360 Google storytelling series is amazing. So I would think Help is a really good one. That's where a baby Godzilla comes down to Earth, and within 2 minutes, he goes from a small lizard, goes down to a tunnel, grows up to a full-size Godzilla, breaks through, and then shrinks back down to the small lizard, all within 2 minutes. It's a completely immersive experience. Is very scary because you've got Godzilla and the tunnels and everything. But beyond that, a lot of the stories that Noni had put out, I think, very, very good. The one that he had, the shooting incident that happened in Florida with Trayvon Martin, where she actually went and got the tapes, the 911 phone calls, I think is something that's really, really cool.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think the VR experience is definitely something that is world-changing, experience-changing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Chris Milk is another name I just want to drop.
Oh, yeah.
The stuff he's done is amazing, too. So.
Yeah. We have a growing community, don't we, Paul?
Yes.
And with these folks who are now providing us a place to go. I mean, we have the mechanism now, the delivery mechanism for our senses. We now just need the places to go, which Jess and Eve are working on as well. So let's get to that. It's clear that one of the things that is sort of one of the, I guess you'd call it a bee in the bonnet or a thorn in the flesh or a burr in the saddle, is this whole language of we use to talk about VR. I mean, in some of your talks, Eve, you've brought up this fact that, as you got into filmmaking, that you need to have a language to talk about these kind of things, and right now we just don't have it. I mean, I have a heck of a time explaining to my wife what this is all about, even though she's experienced it and things like that. So do you want to talk about that? Why you got onto this particular theme of the language of VR, and why that's important, the way we describe it, the lexicon?
I would love to. And I think it's interesting, even though we come at this space, so many of us from different places, whether we're engineers or whether we're creatives, necessity is the mother of invention. And that's really what it comes down to is so, after creating my show, I had the opportunity to teach 360 VR filmmaking at Emerson College, Los Angeles, which was sort of pioneering and teaching VR filmmaking at the college level, and I was excited to be there. And as I was preparing for one of my lessons, I realized that what I wanted to do was I wanted to be able to talk to my students about existing 360 VR works and the choices the creators made and what worked and what didn't. And I also wanted to be able to explain to them their menu of options, really, what the choices were that they could make when they were designing and creating 360 VR films. And I was at a loss for words. I could see the choices that filmmakers were making, but I didn't know how to say it clearly to students without a lot of talking around it, right? We can always describe something, and I liken it to, I would go to a conference and someone would ask me about my business, about my VR sitcom, The Business. They would have all these questions, right? They're like, oh, okay, can you move around in it? Can you affect the story? Do other characters know you're there? It's a game of 20 questions, and it can be a fun conversation, but it can also be a long one. And to have that conversation over and over and over again is inefficient. And so I thought back to how I talked about other stories and other media when it came to point of view, and we have language for books. Right, we all remember from like fourth grade English class that there's first, second, and third person narrative point of view. And if I tell you I read a book and it was a first person narrative, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't need to tell you that that means that the character is telling their story in their own words. Using words like I, me, and my. You know what I mean, and we have a little bit of that translates over to movies, right? We do have first, second, and third person visual point of view. But even combining those, we still can't describe all the options and possibilities available to us in XR. And so I thought, okay, how can I extend that language and actually add a couple of levels to cover the other points of view that we have in an immersive world. And actually, I don't know if now's the moment to get a little bit into the weeds, but I did bring a slide today.
Yeah, let's bring that slide up. The next slide, Mark, if you can. Yeah, here we go.
Okay. So you'll see up there, as I talked about, we see narrative point of view and how that is first, second, and third person, right? And we see visual and also first, second, and third person. And then, so you'll notice above them there's a little bracket, because in VR, we have this amazing opportunity to bring them together or separate them, right? We can have a visual point of view that expresses the narrative point of view different. And a great example of this, and stop me from getting into too much detail, but Notes on Blindness is a VR piece that I imagine many of you might be familiar with. And in it, it's it's an audio recording from the author John Hull, who recorded his experience as he was going blind. And these filmmakers created this amazing virtual reality experience to approximate what he was experiencing. And so when you, as a viewer, are inside Notes on Blindness, you're hearing the thoughts of John Hull, and you're seeing an approximation of what he was seeing. So you can come to the conclusion that you, as the viewer, are meant to be John Hull, which is great. And so this is what I call an embodied experience, right? Where you have first-person narrative and first-person visual experience, and they match, and they give you an embodied first-person experience. Now, interestingly, that can be in contrast to something else. You mentioned the New York Times experiences earlier. They did something called, gosh, it was like the New York Times Traveler or something like that. And this woman, Jada, was traveling around with a 360 camera filming her experiences. And there was voiceover narration of her talking about, say, her experience in Iceland. And at the same time that we're hearing her voice, we're seeing her. We're seeing her sitting there with one of her traveling companions. So even though you're hearing her voice in your head, the fact that you're seeing her in front of you makes you know that you are not, in fact, meant to be Jada. You are sitting with her. So that is a disembodied first-person experience, because it's still a first-person narrative. It's just not your first-person narrative. And so now we start to have language to express these concepts, which can be tricky to convey otherwise. And honestly, if you're thinking, I mean, one of the things I love about language, and I think maybe this is why I study languages so much, is because it shapes your thoughts. And sometimes if you don't even know how to think about something, if you have the language for it, it can help you categorize it. And it can also change how you perceive your experience depending on how you structure the words around it. And so now that we have language, it's much easier for us to see the distinctions in these different kinds of immersive experiences. And then to just add now onto that, right now we understand how visual and narrative points of view have the opportunity to come together and or contrast in immersive. There's still more that we all know. Even right now, we can move around in the space, and if I say something, you can respond to it, right? And that's an option that we don't have in TV. Right? So how do we talk about that? So I added on 2 other tiers. The next one is effectual point of view, and that is an indicator of your effect on the experience, right? And there are 3 levels there. There's non-entity, entity, and participant. And so if you're a non-entity, I'm sure many of you have had this experience when you go into maybe a 360 VR experience where you're kind of a fly on the wall if a fly were invisible and the wall weren't there, right? So that's a non-entity because you're sort of nothing, and no one or nothing in that experience can tell that you're there. And so in that sense, you have no effect on the experience because it's like you're not even there. You're a voyeur. And then the next would be entity, which is where you were there. You were there. You maybe you have a body representing you. If not, then at least the other characters or beings in the space recognize that you're there. They know that you're present. And so just by being there, you have an effect on the scene, right? People would behave differently if you weren't there. They're probably not going to walk through you. If they know you're there, they'll walk around you. So that's an entity point of view. And then participant is what it sounds like. You have the ability to engage in the experience and affect the outcomes. So
excuse me, Eva.
Sorry.
Excuse me. I was going to recommend that you re-enter. We're having a little bit garbled in your message here, and it's so important. So maybe you should re-enter for us. And
sure.
And meanwhile, we'll grill Jess a little bit about this same thing. Okay. So Jess, let's see. Is this resonating with you? Of course, I'm sure that you and Eve talked about this a lot with the immersive point of view. So, what is your take on this? The language of what we're trying to do here.
So this kind of language is the foundation of us and how for the Look Club and how we experience and watch storytelling. So if we're going to review, or a lot of the VR and immersive works are getting judged at film festivals and for Emmys and awards, and there's just like not really much of a common criteria as to like how something is made and if it was made effectively. And so using a baseline of was this the creator's intentions, and did it help them tell their story better? Did it help that story have as strong of an effect? If if they would have used that choice versus another one. So like if you give me an ability to participate in the story, but then I'm like really not affecting the story so much. So I'm going to give a controversial example, an Emmy-winning piece from this year called The Line, which is beautifully made. You're a participant in that story. They have you do things that kind of make the story continue on, but those things don't emotionally drive me into the story further. They're like, it feels more like a little gimmicky moment, and then I'm kind of sitting there on the outside while the story happens again. And I think it was really beautifully done. It was such a great, sweet story, but was that moment worth it? All of the technology and all the time it turned to build it, did it really help me feel what they wanted me to feel in that moment of the story? And I would say it actually didn't. And so, like, just because it's really beautifully and well made doesn't mean it is as effective in how emotionally as we want the story to be. Something we talked about early on is that idea that when a story is so compelling, you forget the mechanism in which it's told. So in that moment, I all of a sudden reminded myself that I had my hands in the space and I could do something, and then the story happened again. But what if, like, another experience that I thought did it incredibly beautifully was Wolves in the Wall, where like I was brought into this story by this little girl as her imaginary friend, and every action that I did in that story made me lean into her and my relationship with her more. And so that's when I felt that it was done effectively. And so what Eve and I do with the taxonomy, and now that she's back, I'll let her kind of finish the last two, but we've been using it to do reviews of work, and over the next month, we'll actually have I think about 20 lightning reviews, or a good amount of lightning reviews coming out over the course of the month that are like 1 to 3 minutes long, where we quickly give our reactions to the stories, and then we quickly go through this immersive point of view, so that if you decide you want to watch the piece, you'll know, like, am I going to have to be a participant in this story, or do I just sit back and relax and let it and enjoy the show? And like, what do I expect when I put on that headset? So
I know, it's because it can be scary to put on a headset if it's like walking into a room when you don't know who or what's inside, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, or worse, like you could be walking into your nightmare, which could be so scary. And I remember when they first translated horror films, that they said it was too scary for VR. Like a simple whisper over your shoulder can be one of the scariest, creepiest things. So to have like an alien running into your personal space or something crazy, that that can create trauma, and I wouldn't want to put that on the head of somebody who is still developing their brain.
Yeah. So let's see. You ready to finish up here, Eve, with your last block?
Sure.
I mean, this is we've been sort of talking about that, haven't we? I mean, with the whole content side in terms of what you're taking away from the experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, my audio was coming.
Yeah, you're breaking up
I'm
quite a
going to
bit.
press ahead. Can you hear me?
I can hear you right now.
Okay, great. So I think I was just finishing the idea of participant, and obviously right now I'm a participant in this experience and another common experience that Beat Saber, right? You're a participant in a game like that. And so while we talk a lot about narrative, it does apply to games, and it applies to any immersive experience, really, regardless of the technology, which is exciting. And the last tier, just to get to it, is experiential, and that speaks to how you affect how you experience the immersive story, which is something that we really don't generally have the opportunity to do in other media. And so this can be a little trickier to understand, but the first is robot, where you have really no control over your experience. So an example of robot experiential point of view is if you're in a VR experience and you feel you're moving, right? You in the VR experience are moving, but you in real life are not doing anything to move yourself. So somebody else is controlling you. And then mortal experiential point of view is a lot. It's just what it sounds like. You pretty much have the ability, the level of control that you do as a human in the world, right? So you have 6 degrees of freedom. You have 0 to 6 degrees of freedom. And deity experiential point of view takes you to the next level. So basically, you can defy the laws of the physical universe and have more control over your experience than you would as a person. For example, you can experience the story from different characters. Like you can literally go inside different people and see it from their point of view. Or you can travel through time. Things like that. Or you can fly.
Right. Yeah. Well, so this is a fantastic way of looking at it, and certainly we can see in VR you have the spectrum of the way that we interact and experiences we get from this. Now, in the end, what are you really trying to do? In the Look Club, you say that you are trying to give people a preview of what to expect. But what is really your long-term objective? I mean, what would you like for this to become? And what is its contribution to the community? Can you give us a feeling for that?
That is a really great question and an important one. And I think my overall goal and I think I share this with you, Tom, is that when I came into VR, I realized just how powerful this medium is that technologists have enabled us to play with, and the impact that these stories can have on people. And the stories that we already consume in books and TV impact people profoundly, and this really takes it to the next level. And I think because of that, it is so important that we tell positive, productive stories that will encourage people to make the world a better place, and to feel good about themselves and others. And I think that this taxonomy is a step to helping people do that, because it allows us to break down and understand how these experiences work, how they affect people emotionally, how they affect how the embodied experience affects people. And that's one of the things that Jessica and I really talk a lot about in our reviews is, what is the impact on us, the viewer? How does the experience make us feel? Think it achieve intended effect, because what's really as a storyteller, what you want to do is think about not just how you can use cool technology, but what impact you want to have on your audience member. And this taxonomy helps make that clearer so that creators can make informed choices and understand first what their options are, and then what impact their options will have on their audience.
And then kind of from from that really sums up our kind of like underlying goals. But I think from a practical standpoint, we have a library of content on our website that we're starting to review and helping other people find immersive work. And I think we want to help it go. We want people to know what's happening in the headset from outside of the headset to compel them to put it on, to join the world, or to become kind of mass available. But also from the creator's perspective, we can't move forward in telling better stories until we watch the stories that have been made and kind of build on top of them. And something that started happening was I was going to festivals and I was seeing work, and it was the same thing over and over again, and they weren't pushing forward in the technology. And so when I saw like Wolves in the Walls, I got so excited because I felt like they actually stepped forward and did something better than what I'd seen before. And so by having a library of content, now people who are interested in making work can go and see work that is similar and know what has been done and how to do it better. And when I first started making work in the immersive space, I remember thinking like, oh, I don't know what's good or not, or like I want to make this feeling happen for my viewer, and I don't have any reference, so I'm gonna just have to experiment and try. And then I went back and made a cinematic short film, and I went and I was able to watch hundreds of films to like help decide how I wanted to tell that story. And so now as we're building this library of content for immersive media, we can give creators that same resource to be able to start understanding what works and more importantly what doesn't work.
Absolutely. Wow. That this is, and what a contribution this will be to our community. I know that, well, Jackie and on the board of directors and Daniel of the Virtual World Society, this is something that we think is such an important area as a community of creators. And because there really is very little community right now for the developers of VR content. And what an important thing this is not only to be able to feel like you're in a family, the camaraderie that comes with that, and the exchanging of ideas, but also to use that to raise up the new generations who want to be doing the same thing and learn from these wise people. So this is such an important contribution. Well, we're sort of about out of time, but what is it that we can do? What we as a community here, what can we do to help you?
That's fantastic.
What's our homework? What's our homework assignment?
Well, engage with us about immersive storytelling. I mean, I think this might be a good time. We could pull up the next slide, which has some information on how to reach us.
The next one. The next one. The next one. Next one. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
So you can find the Look Club at thelook.club online, and give us your thoughts and feedback. I think please check out what we're doing on the internet and on social media, but reach out to us and tell us what's helpful to you, what you'd like to see. We have a few different formats of reviews we're trying, and we're gonna maybe Jess, I'll let you talk about our plans to sort of engage the community with interactive events going forward.
Yeah. So I mean, of like even before that, like if you are a creator, we have a little form for you to just tell us about your work so we can represent it properly on our site and help promote it and have it included in our database. And everything in our database, we're hoping eventually to get to review, even though it's like a lot to do and sometimes hard to see everyone's work, but we're gonna try. So please share your work with us. And then the other part is we want to talk about work together, and actually it was something we wanted to potentially even bring to you, Tom, about us picking a piece and then us all coming together and discussing it, and giving it a month for everyone to find their way to watch it, and then having a conversation about the piece in depth, about what the creators did well and maybe what they could have improved on, and
that's a great idea.
Yeah. So
sort of like a book club kind of thing.
Exactly, a book club for immersive experiences.
And we also want to empower folks. Like if you maybe are involved at a university and you want to create a sort of a look where it's discussed amongst yourselves, like we're also happy to facilitate that and sort of provide some of the tools and the structure around that, because we love coming together here and would like to continue to do that, and we also want to grow the community and allow everybody to have those conversations and facilitate that however we can.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's decide that we're going to decide to be partners.
Okay.
And so we can help out. And I mean, like we have partnered with the educators in VR and with the Black Technology Mentorship Program, with a number of these other we sort of feel like we share the same values and that we want to work together. And it's rather than going off separately, we have this alliance of value that where everyone gets a chance to work together. And so with that, can we ask the audience for questions that they may have to ask you?
Absolutely. I just feel like we have to say you heard it here first. Right?
That's great. Yeah. So let's open it up. We have a few minutes left for questions from the audience, and then we can maybe you guys can make a final statement, and we have a few announcements to make, and then take it from there. And we can hang around for a while, right? Are you available to hang around for a little while longer after that? Okay, great.
And
okay, why don't we start with VR Girl Jean? I just amplified your voice. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi. Say hello to Jean.
Hi. I was wondering, how do you get started with VR storytelling?
I always say, just start. Don't think too much about it. Like, I think you learn most. I mean, at least I learn most through doing. And so there are some really inexpensive tools, like a 360 video camera, and just see what happens when you play and tell a story. So I've done workshops in universities and where we'll make something in 24 hours. We'll just get a few people together, come up with a scene idea, and just make it and try and edit it and see what happens. Put it in the headset and see. So I would say that coupled with watching as much as you can, so you can get a sense of what's out there and what your options are. And so yeah, I would say try to make the cheap and dirty version and think of it as a proof of concept for fundraising for the more expensive version. Did we lose Eve? She has to re-enter.
She'll be coming back, hopefully.
Okay.
Okay. Next question.
That's great. Thanks, Jean. Paul, your voice is amplified.
Yes, I was just at the event, I guess it was yesterday, when you were talking about Pearl. And whatever happened to the Google 360 storytelling group? I think I read the headline that Google canceled it. So does anybody know what the status of it is?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I did read also that that they're no longer, that's not a program that they're investing in, I guess, at the moment. I am hearing there's been some waves of how people are investing, how organizations are investing in content for immersive media. And the last year was a very sad wave. Down spike in the crest. But what I am hearing is that the companies are starting to realize that there are more than gamers in the immersive media space, and those are the people who are buying headsets. And so it seems like there's a new investment coming in the next year or two in immersive media and storytelling. So it's still a really good time to get in, because it's still the beginning. we're in hopefully the end of the beginning and moving into the middle, right? To the Renaissance.
Well, I think we are. We've been through these cycles before, haven't we? And where we get all excited, and then the economic piece of it doesn't happen. That's the big teller. When and there has to be a economy of scale that happens, so that the manufacturers, the content makers, all have an opportunity to put food on the table. In doing this work. I mean, they're following their passion. Otherwise, we relegate ourselves to being hackers, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I would echo that. For me and Eve, a lot of this has been purely passion. We both have other jobs for our income.
Yeah. Well, I can't tell you how many times, we've had, okay, here we go. Welcome back. I can't tell you how many times in these hackathons that I've met people from Google and Amazon and Oculus and all these different groups that they have their day job that they don't particularly like. And they'd much rather build virtual worlds and follow the passion, someone like you are, but you have to make a living. And so this becomes a passion thing. Now, ultimately, if indeed the economy of scale happens, we have now enough energy and substance that you can make a living doing this. And that this becomes a life, a career. And so that's what I would hope for as we go along. Yeah. Other questions?
Okay. So Daniel, co-founder of Educators in VR. You are amplified.
Hello there. Hi, Jess and Eve. Thanks for that fascinating talk. I'm really encouraged to hear that there are developments in this area for kind of developing a language around it, because I think you're right. As it grows, we need common points of reference. If you know me at all, you know I have too many questions. I have lots of questions. Just wanted to share a little funny thing before I ask my question. Paul was talking earlier about augmented reality, and I misheard him, and I thought he said awkward reality, and that's like virtual reality.
Never. Yeah.
My question is, if we assume that immersive media can have more of an impact on the participant or viewer, do you, as producers, therefore feel a greater sense of responsibility for what you're putting out?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I think that's a big part of why I created comedy. I know it can be, it can feel laughable, but comedy makes people feel better. It really does. I mean, if you watch a half an hour of television in 2D, people feel better. So and there have been studies that show that watching 360 in a headset has about a 27 to 30% more emotional impact than watching it on a flat screen. So I feel really lucky that the work that I do can make you feel 30% better than a comedy show on television. You know?
And do you also work with 360 3D or 180 3D? Do you have preferences?
I don't have. Oh, I'll let you answer that, Jess.
So sometimes I like 360 2D because it's higher res, unless I have more money to do better tools. And then if I have budget, then I'll add 3D or add agency and add worlds and kind of keep moving up. But I like to be able to do what's most comfortable within my budget, if that helps.
Yes.
And I would say I'm really intrigued by storytelling and adapting storytelling to different media, and I'm always and my strengths are really writing and directing, and I'm always happy to work with collaborators whose strengths are in the technology departments and play around with how we can tell stories for all of those different types of technology.
Ditto to that. It definitely, I have a little bit of a tech skill, which I think is worse for me than if I didn't.
That's great.
Okay. Next question. Lawless, you are now amplified. Well, I'm trying. Oh. Okay, Lawless, I can't amplify you for some reason, so why don't you say your question and somebody on stage just repeat his question, okay? Please. Lawless, are you here? Oh, maybe that's the problem. His avatar left. Okay, St. Justin, you're up.
Hey there. So that was a really interesting talk. I enjoyed it.
Thanks.
So on my side, I'm more on the tools side of things and the actual technology side of things. I guess my question would be, what would you like to see from the technology? What would you like us to create from a technology perspective so that you can tell your story more effectively?
I think I would love more collaboration. So, as we sometimes, I have a story and an idea, and then I speak to my technical team, and then I have to adapt that story and idea, or having a sense of what we're able to create and what our timeline, budget, and what all that means with the storytelling. And I think when every story has its own tools that it needs specifically to make that story the most effective. And so, for me, it's just if there's a technologist like yourself who's really interested in telling stories, that we just become friends so that we can work together.
Okay.
So heightening the ability of communication would be the answer to that.
Yeah,
I think that's a good. Yeah. certainly, St. Dustin, this idea of having a collaborative space for creating content would be, don't you think that would be a boon for what you're trying to do? I mean, where you can bring your team together in VR to create VR.
Yeah.
And,
that's sort of a holy grail.
And I think we're all headed there, but just to make it easier. I mean, right now, even just to get into a headset to attend an event is there are all sorts of hurdles and technological challenges, even for those among us who do it all the time. And I know that's something that everyone's working on and will absolutely get better at time. Just the reliability and ease of the interface.
Apparently, several didn't hear the question to begin with, and the question that came from St. Justin was really, what is it that he is coming from a technology standpoint, He asked you the questions, what do you need? What could you use? What could he be providing to help you? And then you gave your answer to that question.
No, actually, I'll add one more thing because I do think that's such a great question. I think more interconnectivity between the virtual world and the real world, because it's going to be a part of our lives, and so and so how can they not be so separate? How can we make it easier for people who maybe aren't in headsets
I can definitely second what you're saying there. That's definitely the next level focus. We're actively trying to bridge the gap between this sort of creative workforce, space. If you think of it from like an EMG perspective, once we remove the line between the the physical body that we have, that we walk around in, the avatar that we're walking around in every day, and we blur that line between that and the actual VR headset. I mean, the amount of different things that you can do with that technology is endless. I mean, we could literally, there's so many different things you can do with that technology. It's not even funny.
Do we have time for one more question? We have one more in the queue.
Okay, one more question. You bet.
Okay, the Hive 101, I'm going to amplify your voice, and you are literally the last question for this event. Can we hear you? The Hive? Okay, maybe not. Okay, Tom, take it away.
Okay, well, you bet. Well, let's do this. There'll be well, let me ask first. If there any last comment you'd like to make, and then I'll finish up with some slides, and then we'll open it up for people to come up and ask questions one-on-one. Anything in closing remarks you'd like to make?
Yeah, I'll make that you sort of offered that you could do homework. So I'll just make the list real short of ways you can support us. I mean, first of all, if you are a creator, please go to thelook.club and share your content with us so that we can help get it to a broader audience, and show your interest in what we're doing by subscribing to us on YouTube and following us on Instagram and on Twitter and on LinkedIn. That lets us know that there's an audience for what we're doing, and there are people interested in being a part of this community, and share it with anybody else who would be interested in this, so that we get a sense that there are people out there who want to be a part of this community.
Yeah, I would just say, we really want to hear your voice. That we don't want it to be a one-way conversation. So, if there's a piece you're just wanting to talk about, or that really struck you, please tell us. If you don't think you agree with our review, definitely tell us. That's the best kind of conversation. So, we are just a single point of view, and we want to learn from everyone in the community. So please, this is an invitation to join us.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you, guys. This has been wonderful to have my sisters with me here, and let's give them a round of applause and hearts and all kinds of emojis here for spending this time with us. You're wonderful.
Does my curtsy work? Did it work? If I curtsy? I'm trying to figure out how to dance with just arms and a head.
That's great. So let's go to just a couple announcements, and then we'll have you come up and chat with Eve and Jess. Can we go back in our slides a little bit here? Okay, yeah. Just so you know, coming up 2 weeks from today at 11 a.m., we're going to have a special event, and certainly Jess and you and Eve are welcome to attend this. Caitlin Krause is going to be, she's on the staff of the Virtual World Society, our Director of Community and Business Development, wants to have a sort of a workshop where we get to going on the different ways that members of the Virtual World Society and friends can get involved in the projects we're doing. We're really excited about some of the activities that are coming up. We're working on a project we call that's sort of unfolding. It's sort of just at the beginning called Project Spark. And also we're doing our Make-A-Wish Foundation activity and things like that. But this is a time to sort of come share your ideas and how you would like to contribute. So Caitlin is going to be running that workshop. Then immediate thereafter, the next slide, is our gathering event. This is our networking event where we're going to, sort of like we did with our Halloween event, we're going to have a Winter Wonderland. And so with thanks to Mark and to Laurel and educators in VR, Donna, this is an amazing world to where we can enjoy wintertime together. And so it's just hanging out for an hour 2 weeks from today, starting at 1 o'clock. So think about that, and hopefully you can come. And so also, if you're not a member, join the Virtual World Society. It's free. Go to our website, virtualworldsociety.org, and find out what we're up to. And we are trying to be the sort of a lighthouse to this community and to bring light to people and to extend vision. So thanks for coming. It's wonderful to have you here. And let's give everybody give each other some emojis here. And so if we can, Donna, go ahead and